Danica Patrick is making headlines at the Daytona 500. Another woman, though, is also making history. I got a chance to meet the first African-American woman to get a NASCAR racing license, Tia Norfleet. And she sure has big dreams one day to compete in that big race.
Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Danny B, and sometimes on this channel we add into our list of NASCAR drivers you forgot about. However, in today's video, this one might just fall more in line with some of my obscure NASCAR topic videos, and as the title suggests, I want to take a look at the curious case of NASCAR driver Tia Norfleet. Now, right from the get-go, the thing that surprises me the most about Tia is the fact that when I Google her, unlike most drivers I research, I don't see a racing reference page on page 1, which is weird considering how much I had heard of her regarding her being the first ever African-American female NASCAR driver, which in my eyes is fantastic. We need more equality in this sport. However, what threw me off even more was when I went to Racing Reference and searched for Tia Norfleet, no driver was found. So now all of a sudden I'm just stuck here thinking, so was she not a second generation NASCAR driver like she's promoted herself to be? I mean, she does have a website showing her as being proud to race car number 34, much like her father did and much like his inspiration, well-known African-American racing pioneer Wendell Scott. Now, while that's awesome, should you really be titling the website as TiaNorfleet34.com if you're not really driving a 34 car? But let's not spend too much time critiquing the website, let's review some of her racing background. So, the most recent form of competition that I can see is that she actually took part in season 2 of a racing reality show called 0 to 60 presented by Lexus, in which Tia Norfleet competed against Carmelita Jeter, Keith Robinson, Lamont Rucker, J.D. Williams, and Rhetoric Williams in a variety of challenges with the support of their driving coaches Jack Hawksworth and Scott Pruitt.
Oh, he lost it right there! I'm playing enough Mario Kart to know. Remove your hands from my team, okay?
Pop your collar.
You know what I'm saying? They're getting trained and coached up by 2 drivers from 3 GT Racing. Yeah. Speed.
In which the winner of this competition would get a personal vehicle to drive of their choice from Lexus for 1 year. Wait a minute. They only get it for a year? Well, what good is that? I've never heard of a trophy being basically a lease. In a year they gotta buy a car or just go back to what they had before. I've competed in fishing tournaments where the winner gets a new truck or boat and they get to keep it. But that's beside the point of trying to figure out how Tia Norfleet entered the NASCAR world. So we can't begin to talk about Tia Norfleet without discussing her father, who had a NASCAR background that, like his daughter, had an extremely controversial career. Bobby Norfleet was originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and over his career, he raced anything from motorcycles to drag cars and of course stock cars, and in 2000, Norfleet announced that he would field and drive his own truck in NASCAR's Truck Series, but here was a problem for Bobby. He didn't have enough experience for NASCAR. Plain and simple. I mean, heck, I would probably have as much experience driving a race car that Bobby did apparently when he decided he wanted to have a NASCAR truck. And after the Truck Series weekend at Pikes Peak Speedway, NASCAR was making headlines in a bad way in 2000 because of Bobby, after he was telling anyone that would listen that he was prevented by NASCAR from racing for racial discrimination, when in reality that was definitely not the case. For many years, NASCAR has had a long-standing rule that a driver must prove they can handle their race and skills either on smaller tracks or in their smaller series. I mean, Kyle Petty, the son of Richard Petty, was still required to run an ARCA race at Daytona before NASCAR would clear him to compete in NASCAR's Winston Cup Series, just to make sure you can handle the race. So NASCAR does not and will not make exceptions. Even Danica Patrick had to prove herself in an ARCA race before she could step into the Nationwide Series. But as for Bobby, he was allowed by NASCAR to compete on tracks that are either shorter than 1 mile or on a road course. And if it wasn't one thing to be challenged on what races you can run on because of your experience level, it was another to also be lacking sponsors, and in Bobby's case, he was affected by both. In fact, NASCAR actually tried to help Bobby in his sponsorship efforts, as NASCAR's vice president at the time, Brian France, actually called upon a number of companies who were interested in sponsoring a NASCAR team, and he even personally flew in some company executives, so don't think that NASCAR never wanted him to succeed. We all know that Brian France has had quite a controversial career himself, but if he's going that far to help you, that is still a really big deal. Do not take that lightly. With some time, Norfleet would end up lining up a sponsorship with record labels 40 Street Records and So Def Records, and Bobby would make plans to race at Martinsville Speedway. However, he was unsuccessful at qualifying for this race. After failing to make the field at the first course he was eligible to compete in, he moved on to Portland International Raceway Road Course, which, as mentioned earlier, NASCAR would allow him to compete in. While he would make the field for this race, it would not be an impressive stat, as it was simply a technicality, as out of 34 spots available, Norfleet was one of 33 trucks who showed up to compete, and despite qualifying 17 miles per hour slower than the pole speed, he was in the race, and in this race, it was simply a disaster for Bobby's team. Bobby Norfleet, who was in the same race as Bill Lester on this day, marking the first and only time in NASCAR history that two African American drivers have competed in the same race, proceeded to be black flagged a total of 3 times by NASCAR for not maintaining the required minimum speed, and he would finish 32nd of 33 trucks. By comparison, Bill Lester completed this race and would finish in 24th place. A few weeks later, Bobby Norfleet brought his number 34 entry to the 1 mile oval at Pikes Peak, and essentially, NASCAR was like, "What are you doing here? You've not proven yourself. We told you only short tracks and road courses." It wasn't for anything bad, but quite frankly, he definitely had not proven himself to be experienced enough to be licensed on these larger tracks. He couldn't even qualify for Martinsville, and he couldn't even reach minimum speed in Portland. If there had been more trucks there, he probably wouldn't have even qualified for that one too. That's just a fact. It wouldn't matter if you were Dale Jr. If that was your experience, NASCAR ain't letting you race, but this wasn't the story Bobby was telling people. He was telling the media that NASCAR wouldn't let him race because he's African American. And I'll say it, that's complete BS, and if I was Bill Lester, who was making his own way during the same time period, under the same circumstances, I would be insulted, and if I'm NASCAR, whose sitting vice president personally worked to find you a sponsor, I don't know why I'd let him race again. Aside from the fact that it has now thrown a lot of negative media attention your way. So, despite it simply being for Norfleet's lack of experience, NASCAR had to be careful how they proceeded, but Bobby Norfleet did attempt to qualify in the next race at Evergreen Speedway, but no surprise, he failed to qualify for this race yet again. After this, Bobby stopped running in NASCAR, and he actually said that he intended to file a lawsuit with NASCAR for not letting him compete on bigger tracks, but perhaps he was advised not to, as looking at the facts, he would have not even had a case, and no lawsuit was ever filed. Norfleet would once again return into NASCAR in 2005, but as an owner, attempting to make the race at Memphis Motorsports Park with Mike Harmon driving his number 24 Chevy, but the team failed to qualify, and then Norfleet said that he would enter cars in the Cup Series and Busch Series in 2006, but no entry ever came in this time. Then in 2007, Bobby Norfleet would once again make an attempt to race a stock car in ARCA at Talladega in Roger Carter's number 48 Dodge, but he did fail to qualify for this race as well. So, with no offense really, it's safe to say that Bobby was unsuccessful in NASCAR. And if your black flags matter, yeah, I'd consider indeed calling him a NASCAR bust. Then, for a few years, the name Norfleet would just remain quiet in the NASCAR world until around 2010 or 2011, which was the first time that I had recalled hearing about this young girl race car driver named Tia Norfleet, after seeing some sponsored Facebook posts promoting Tia in a fire suit with a Nationwide Series logo stitched onto her Impact fire suit, and my reaction, much like many, was simply,
"Wait! Who are you?"
Well, this was none other than the daughter of Bobby Norfleet beginning to promote herself as the first ever licensed female African American NASCAR driver, and she was looking to make starts in NASCAR's Nationwide Series.
Can I ask you one more question? What?
Tia was born in 1986, and she grew up watching her father's dreams of becoming a race car driver, and because of this, I don't doubt that Tia did have aspirations to want to race, but most sponsors, knowing of the background that her father had in NASCAR, definitely couldn't have helped in her hopes of climbing the racing ladder. According to Tia's Wikipedia page, at the age of 14, she started racing in go-kart racing events before going on to attempt a drag racing career at local and regional levels, and I'm unable to find any results from her time here, so I really don't know how she was during this. Then by 2000, Norfleet switched to entry-level spec racing, competing in Bandoleros, and again, I can't find any results from her time there either, so I'm sorry about that. But then in 2004, she moved into racing in a handful, and I mean a handful, of late model races, and she became the first female African-American driver to purchase a NASCAR late model series racing license. Notice that keyword, purchase. After speaking with a NASCAR driver that will remain unnamed, the license that this is referring to costs around $2,500, and really anyone can purchase it. They told me that literally I could purchase that if I just told someone that I was wanting to be a NASCAR late model driver. So to most drivers, they told me that this really isn't a big deal. So while her achievement is true, she is a licensed NASCAR/ARCA driver, it's probably not at a level that was promoted around 2012 in these photo shoots with her in a Nationwide Series fire suit. So what did she do with her NASCAR license? As I mentioned, I couldn't find her on Racing Reference, so I actually turned to NASCAR Man with Racing Reference, and he told me that by all accounts he could find, Tia competed in one NASCAR Wayland late model race at Motor Mile Raceway, and then I found a rather poor quality YouTube video titled Tia Norfleet Race Day Motor Mile Speedway, posted to YouTube in 2012, which is when NASCAR Man claimed that she had actually made this start, and in this video I see her making pace laps and then running one lap well up the race pace, and then the video seems to cut off after I didn't see her go back around the track of the field, and it's safe to say that she probably started and parked in this race. It also definitely doesn't help her cause that there were actually some of her competitors who were quoted saying that they would not get onto the track during practice while Tia was making practice laps because they didn't feel safe because, in their words, she was really slow. And as far as I know, by all accounts that I can find, that was it for her stock car racing career. I honestly can't dig any more stats out for her, which is just so weird because of how many articles I've found seemingly praising her racing career accomplishments, one even saying, "Make room, Danica Patrick, there's a new girl in town." Keep in mind, this was written in 2012 when Danica was making Cup Series starts, and she very nearly won the race at Montreal in 2012. Yeah, don't act like you don't believe she was on track to win that race before running over a fan's shoe, breaking something on that car. Trust me, Tia was no Danica Patrick. In fact, while many lately have criticized Angela Ruck's accomplishments as of late, it's a fair argument that she's proved to be more legitimate than Tia's background. And it wouldn't take long for some journalists to speak up and question her credentials, starting with Viv Bernstein of the New York Times writing an article in 2013 calling out her claims to be inconsistent in her self-promotion efforts. Those self-promotion efforts, in fact, came from her grassroots funding initiatives in which she claimed it would help finance her racing career, but as we know, she never made it to race in a major series in 2012, and the money raised is really unaccounted for as far as public knowledge is concerned. In addition, that New York Times article revealed that Tia Norfleet also had several criminal offenses on her record, and she was actually 26 in 2012 despite telling people that she was 24. Personally, those details would not concern me because I know for a fact that several people in racing have served jail time. Look at Junior Johnson, for example. But what does concern me is how much appeared to be hidden about Tia with an already questionable background. But this article and the others that followed led to NASCAR's Vice President of Public Affairs at the time saying, "I am uncomfortable with Tia representing herself in the way that she has." This led to a response from Norfleet claiming that these accusations were a biased smear campaign, and her dad Bobby Norfleet called it a witch hunt. Tia did later confirm that she did in fact have a criminal record, and her only NASCAR start was indeed a start and park, but she also said that she had never claimed to be a Nationwide Series driver. And well, Tia, your fire suit pictures would say that, well,
The lie detector test determined that was a lie.
and while you'd imagine that the claims of racing success would go away after the 2013 articles, it really didn't, as she would on occasion be seen doing some interviews in a fire suit, being billed as a NASCAR driver, but perhaps none was as strange as the project done in 2018 by the media company Thinks and their subsidiary Harper'sBazaar.com. Okay, let me just read this first sentence of the article, and you watching this as a race fan, tell me if you would want to keep reading. Tia Norfleet wears $1,600 custom racing suits to work, but her chosen profession is far from posh, requiring both laser focus in the moment and continuous off-season training. I'm not wanting to read anymore. I can already tell this writer does not seem to know much about racing at all. As if this wasn't enough, there was a video to join the article showing her wearing a crew jacket from Matt Crafton's team at an abandoned track, so I really think that they bought that jacket at the team shop as anyone could, and then I'm pretty sure they probably just rented out that speedway for some time. But the part that baffles me the most is that they actually got an interview to be done at the 4 Sport Racing facility in which Tia is shown being seated in Matt Crafton's truck, and the video seems to suggest that she races for the team while battling polycystic ovarian syndrome, a condition that causes heavy irregular periods. I'm still just so amazed as to why Forceport, a top-level truck program, would approve this to be made in their facility unless they just didn't have all the details. Out of all that I've found on Tia Norfleet, this one probably takes the cake as being the most misleading that I have found so far. While I do believe she may suffer from that condition, which sounds incredibly horrible to deal with if trying to pursue a racing career, I just can't say that I approve of the way Tia has been marketed to those not knowing much about NASCAR as a top-level African-American female NASCAR driver, and there's a reason that Bubba Wallace would say in 2018, Tia Norfleet is a joke, but hey, that's Bubba's words, I'm just quoting him. So after reviewing everything, can I say that Tia Norfleet and her father Bobby were NASCAR drivers? Yes, by making a start, they are. But I don't agree that they were at any top level, and there are definitely others doing things better, and while I really hope a day comes where there is a woman, even a woman of color, dominating NASCAR's Cup Series, it's pretty clear that it will not come in the insanely curious case of Tia Norfleet. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, use the like button. Have an opinion to share? Leave me a comment. Want more content? Follow me on Twitter at DannyBTalks and hit subscribe and check out the other videos on my channel. Have another story I should look at? Send it my way. Do you need a shirt? Well, check out my store on Teespring. Until next time, I appreciate you watching the video and I hope you have a great day. Bye guys.